There's one more important piece of information though. Just like you can't control when the adaptive program is initiated because you weren't expecting the conflict, you also can't control which adaptive program is initiated or which body organ or tissue is affected. This is because the conflict isn't about the event itself, as much as it's about how your subconscious perceives the event. And any number of things can affect your perception, such as your personality, your values, your beliefs, your family, your culture, your upbringing. And these are the things that I help my clients work through in my programs. If we use the argument with your spouse as an example, can you think of a few different ways that it could be perceived by your subconscious depending on your background and history of experiences? Maybe you struggle with self-esteem and you feel guilty, like it's your fault or you deserve it to have your spouse be upset with you. In that case, you could be suffering from what we call a self-devaluation conflict, and you could experience joint symptoms like arthritis. Or maybe you grew up in a volatile household, and when people raise their voices in anger, it's hard for you to handle the ugliness. So you suffer from what we call an indigestible morsel conflict and experience digestive symptoms like ulcerative colitis or IBS. Or maybe you feel provoked by your spouse. You're angry. You're suffering from what we call a territorial anger conflict, which results in developing gallstones. Or maybe you're afraid that the constant bickering could lead to divorce. So you suffer from what we call a separation conflict, which can result in breast cancer. Can you see how one event could result in any number of biological conflicts developing, depending on how it's perceived by the subconscious? Here's another example. I have two different clients that I worked with, and the situation they faced was almost identical, but their physical responses were very different. Amy was a young woman who lived at home with her parents. One afternoon, she came outside of her room to find her mother clearing her personal belongings from the dining room table. And her mother was upset and frustrated and accused Amy of being thoughtless for leaving her things all around the house to be cleaned up. And Amy apologized profusely, and that night had severe joint pain as she tossed and turned in her sleep. My other client, Jeff, came home from work to find his wife clearing his personal belongings from the dining room table. She too was upset and frustrated and accused Jeff of being thoughtless for leaving his things all around the house to be cleaned up. Jeff, however, was annoyed and asked his wife to please stop touching his things. And the next morning he woke up with severe heartburn and vomiting. Did you notice the difference? Amy felt guilty and worried that her mother's frustration meant that she was selfish. So she suffered a self-devaluation conflict that affected her bones. Jeff, on the other hand, was irritated that his personal space and boundaries were being violated by his wife. So he suffered a territorial anger conflict that affected his stomach. Interesting stuff, right?